All right, we got Angelo Sisco on the podcast. Angelo is the owner of a gym called O'Hare CrossFit. I've known Angelo for a while, bumming around various continuing education seminars in the fitness business, various competitive fitness events, all that kind of good stuff. And Angelo is pretty much the definition of a lifelong learner. We kind of dig into this in the discussion, but we talk about not just wanting to consume information and learn stuff and all that good stuff that I ramble on about regularly, but also really putting yourself in uncomfortable situations in order to learn more, right? Really going the extra mile, in Angelo's case, out to Milford, Connecticut, the extra many hundreds of miles in order to learn a lot and to take advantage of opportunities given to him. So Angelo runs probably one of the most successful CrossFit businesses in the Chicago area, which is certainly helped by his suburban rent, to say the least. But this business is rough and there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and on the inside of a lot of gyms, it's not as peachy as it looks on the outside. And I can say that from experience, knowing the various states of the back-end numbers of South Loop strength and conditioning throughout the years. But Angelo actually has built something that's pretty sustainable at O'Hare CrossFit, and he's able to serve a lot of people and not just have to kill himself coaching all the time. And he's built a really solid team around him that's actually executing on, his vision and getting people healthy and giving them a great fitness experience. Angelo is also an alpha hippie, as we discussed in this interview as well. Can be a potentially intimidating man. He has a very large chest, as we discuss, but he also has a pretty esoteric and eccentric spiritual side to him as well, which I find mildly ridiculous, but also pretty great. So Angelo, the man with a nice chest, I think you're going to like this one. Check it out. This is Todd Neef. I'm out here is this Franklin Park? Franklin Park at O'Hare CrossFit with Angelo Sisco. Not actually a Chicago CrossFit gym, despite some propaganda and misinformation out there on the internet. This is definitely not in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So, discussions surrounding Angelo running one of the better gyms in Chicago are just blatantly false,
bullshit,
misconstrued, inappropriate information, very manipulative fake news. So I think it's important to clear the record on that. Mm-hmm. But Angelo, I wrote down a bunch of questions for you, and I think it's always interesting to sort of start with when we first met each other. Okay. And I don't know if this is actually when we first met, but I remember I was a coach at Atlas CrossFit, and you came in, and did we have an appointment for me to teach you how to do kipping, or did you just show up?
I think there was a clinic maybe, but it was when we met. This had to be like 2011.
Yeah, it was 2010, 2011.
Like very early. Yeah, and there was just an open thing for a clinic. And I think it was like for the members, but I was like, shit, I need some help. I don't know what the hell's really going on with this stuff. And I just showed up. And that was it.
I remember thinking that was like really cool. So here's the situation. I was teaching a kipping clinic, and it was supposed to be for Atlas CrossFit members. And then this large, intimidating man, not from Chicago, from Franklin Park, strolls in and wants to learn how to do kipping. Yeah, and I remember thinking that was actually really cool because I don't know if you've experienced this as a coach, but at that time, especially in like 2010, 2011, I was like stoked and so excited to like teach anyone anything. Mm-hmm. And then I just remember being very frustrated with members because they didn't actually seem to care that much. I was like, are you kidding me? I care about this so much. Sure. And I know all this stuff. And like, dude, if I look back at the emails I would send members, I would send them like 5 pages of recommendations. So they'd be like, can you tell me some information about nutrition? I'd be like, yes.
It was all so fresh to us. But also too, at that time, to your point, is there wasn't as amount of information available like to the masses as it is now.
Sure.
So I could understand that.
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is actually something really interesting about you. What drove you to be like, I'm just going to go? How did you even find out about that? And how did you decide to go?
I think I was just randomly looking up other CrossFit gyms and what they were doing and different kind of clinics and different things like that. And my biggest thing was I never wanted to not have the tools to teach somebody how to do something. And if I teach it a certain way and it makes sense to me, that doesn't mean it's going to make sense to somebody else. So I was like, man, if I go there and they have one better way or say something a little bit different, and that might be a difference for me, that's what I wanted to do. Because like I said, the days of this being all over the internet in 2011, it was very still underground. So it wasn't like there wasn't Kelly Starrett, there wasn't Power Monkey putting out Hollow and Arches. So you had to go and figure this out, I guess. You know what I mean? You really did.
Yeah, you just had to show up uninvited at clinics.
That's it.
So I think that's that mindset of like, all right, I'm going to actually just put myself in situations that aren't necessarily totally comfortable in order to learn is super fascinating and probably like one of the most important things for getting better. Have you always done that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, it's so funny you say this. So 2 months ago, I started taking piano lessons.
How's that going?
It's awesome. Yeah. I learned my first song.
Which is what?
You're Cheating Hard by Hank Williams.
All right, cool. So you sing it too?
No, I don't sing. My music teacher plays the guitar and I just play along with the piano and we vibe a little bit on Saturday mornings. It's a great time. And then this week I just started taking jiu-jitsu. I think a lot of times when we get older, we forget how to learn. And so I just think the art of learning is important to keep fresh.
Sure. So it's not just the information that you want. It's the process of putting yourself in a spot that you maybe feel like you don't know what's going on and you have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, in our little CrossFit bubbles, we become little celebrities and you go do piano and you're not shit, and it's just, it's a good place to be. Or I just got done with jiu-jitsu an hour ago and I got thrown around for an hour and a half straight. Nobody cares what my squat was.
Submissive man.
Yeah, I guess so. When this guy's choking you out. Yeah. So I think just being in those situations and humbling yourself and however you want to call it, just being a beginner is essential.
Yeah, for sure. And then did you have that mindset before you got into CrossFit?
I could say pretty much it's been a very a lifelong thing. I'm not a very formal school learner because that really isn't my jam. But finding mentors or seeking out things, I've been pretty aggressive with that. I would say most of my life, just because I never took information just reading it or anything like that. I wanted to go and live it and play with it. So I think it's better for me.
Sure. And something that, you've mentioned on other podcasts, and I think we've talked about this before too, where you kind of had a bootleg pizza business.
That's where I started.
Yeah. Right. First of all, just give us that story quickly because it's funny and awesome. Okay. And then I want to know if you applied your learning methodologies to your pizza sales as well.
Okay, yeah. So here we go. So one night, I was maybe 23. I was hanging out with my friend, and his family owns a pizza place. And at the time, we were 23, and we didn't really have much money. And I was like, man, it would be so great if we could go out. And he was like, yeah, me too. But we didn't have any money. I'm like, and we were hanging around at his restaurant. I go, well, they're closing up and there's pizza left over. Why don't we throw it in a catering truck and drive downtown by the bars and just try to sell the pizza? And that would be fun, right? And he's like, yeah, I don't care. So we loaded up this truck with some leftover pizza and we're driving. We were in Lincoln Park, and sure enough, a bunch of drunk people came up to the truck and we sold pizza, and it was summer out. So it was actually really fun. So people wanted to hang out the whole time. And so I was like, man, we're on to something. He's like, yeah. And so we started doing it the next week and the week after. And then this is when Bon V was really popular. And I became friends with the valet and the bouncers and the owner of Bon V. So they let us park on the street. And then,
did you just give them pizza? And that's
it. Yeah. Everybody got fed. Sure. That was my permits. And then, there's another place. It's called Nick's Beer Garden. It's Milwaukee and North Avenue, and it's open late night. And it's everybody who's out goes there after. And we made friends.
It's a 4 a.m. bar. Most of the bars in Chicago close at 2, and that one closes at 4.
Yeah, so that's where everybody kind of went to. And so we made friends with them, fed everybody there, and then fast forward 3-4 months, we had 2 trucks and 4 employees, and it was a Wednesday through Sunday gig, and people would just leave envelopes of cash in my glove compartment after they were done selling pizza, and that's how I made my living.
That is incredible. So you have this sort of lifelong learner mentality of like, I want to learn. I want to make myself uncomfortable. I want to put myself in situations where I have to figure it out. I mean, are you thinking about your pizza business in a similar way of like, okay, what can I do to sell more pizza? What can I do to learn more about the economics of pizza production and transport? Like what is your thought process with that?
Thinking about it now, I guess I could think about it in more of a formal sense. But back then I didn't realize what it was. Is I just made really good friends with everybody around there. So the valet were my buddies, and they would text me when there was a lot of people there and save me a spot. And the bouncer would let me know when they were open a special night, or if some Bears players were coming so we could bring more pizza. So I just would develop.
The Bears players eat a lot.
Oh, they do. Well, that's the thing too, is like, so Brian Urlacher and Casey owned Bon V. So like at the end of the night, you would give them like 15 slices of pizza and they would just sit in the back of their bar and eat their pizza. But it just making really good relationships, and then also to not making the relationships really one-sided. And that was something, so we always went above and beyond for whatever else they needed to. So I think that's probably been by far the biggest lesson now that I really think about it.
Sure. So it was not just like, how can I get in here and get my money for my pizza? It's like, how can the fact that I'm here benefit the bar patrons? How can it benefit the bar itself as a business? How can it benefit the owners of the bar who want to eat 15 slices of pizza? How can it benefit the bouncers and the valets who actually control access? Mm-hmm. You kind of are intuitively building this little web of connection and friendship surrounding your greasy, delightful...
It's delightful at that time, for sure. That's definitely got to be it. I mean, even too, like with the police, and it just fed everybody, made sure everybody was happy, and they let me do my thing, and that was by far the biggest thing. Just being friends. Very
reasonable. Not a bad business model.
No.
And so, while you were selling borderline illegal pizza,
it's not legit. It was totally illegal.
Yeah, sure. What kind of food permits did you have for that?
Zero.
Did you start CrossFit simultaneously while you were running that business?
I started training people in July of 2009, and I still was doing that in the evenings or the weekends. I didn't have to do it as much because we had some employees, so only on Fridays and Saturdays I would go. But that went. I opened the gym in November of 2010, so I did that to right around July, August of 2010. So right before I opened the gym, I stopped doing it.
Oh, got it. So there was no point where you were kind of facilitating extreme caloric excess a few nights a week and then facilitating extreme elite fitness the other days.
No, I took a side.
Okay, got it.
I took a side. For sure.
That's too bad. That would have been like a great dichotomy. And
it's like Jekyll and Hyde. Exactly. I don't know if I could have pulled that off for too long.
Yeah, and then your training clients find out about I guess Planet Fitness provides pizza and fitness.
It's mind-blowing.
So they kind of probably got that idea from you.
That's it. I started that trend. Sorry, guys.
I think that's probably where that came from. So for you started O'Hare CrossFit kind of in like the early adopter phase, right? Where it's like, okay, you can show up with a few medicine balls and have a few jump stretch bands and not really know what's going on, just be like, all right, guys, like we're going to get after it. And then since then, you've seen the functional fitness industry really take off and grow, and then you've grown along with it. What have you seen as major changes in that, I guess, marketplace in terms of what clients expect, in terms of what it takes to run a business over that time frame?
That's a great question.
We can be more specific if you want.
No, I got it. So the best way I could explain it is, I was just trying to think of my words, is by far you needed more people skills to run functional fitness in this day and age than you did back then. In 2011, 2012, when we were first up and going, people came there to get smashed, and that's all they really cared about. And now it's become this thing where you're pulling from the masses. So you're getting people that don't necessarily want to get smashed or have never really pushed themselves or different things like that. And so you have to have a much bigger toolbox dealing with the mass that you're getting now versus what you got back then. Even if it was male or female back then, they were reasonably cut from a similar cloth, versus now it's much wider open. And so your ability to still lead them that way without maybe so much harshness or brashness has by far been the biggest lessons.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. That back in the early days, it was, very much a market and a group of people who were self-selecting for wanting something kind of extreme and rough around the edges and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, for sure. I opened up the gym with $4,000. It was nothing. Like it was not a real gig.
Yeah, sure.
But back then, just the nature of the aggressiveness and the rawness was what was the appeal.
Sure. And then did you notice any tipping points throughout the years where it's like, hey, I have to change my own behavior or my own management style or my own way of relating to clients that was like, whoa, what just happened? What do I do now?
Yeah, there was definitely some blowback. I've had a lot of terrible interactions. I'm not, I didn't come from a world where I was very smooth and polished. There was plenty of interactions that I've made mistakes with. I said things that I shouldn't have said. I became emotional just out of my own passion and I really love what we do. And sometimes my love for what we do can turn into a place of me defending what I think it is, almost like very similar to what I think people think about religion. And so I've had plenty of interactions where they've not gone well. And then I just felt bad about them. I'm sure the other person did too, but I felt worse about them. And that's when I kind of realized that maybe around like 2013, 2014, like it was time to, maybe more 2014, that it was time to really, you can't just use a hammer all the time.
Sure.
And
that was your preferred tool?
It was my preferred tool. And the sick part is that it worked for 3 years of business. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to be involved in CrossFit when it boomed. So when you're going from 50 members and next year you got 175 members, you think you're winning. So you don't even care what other kind of feedback you could be getting, because screw you.
It's working.
I tripled my business. What are you going to say to me? And so it came at that point, I think. And then I started realizing that it wasn't going to last long term.
Sure. So you started realizing that maybe you can't just hit everything with a hammer. What did you start doing instead?
I started being a better listener. I think.
How and why? Did you reach out to mentors? Did you read books? Did you just become self-reflective and be like, wait, I'm causing all these problems? What's the deal?
So I would say since mid 2014, early 2015, I've had an aggressive, I don't know what you want to call it, awareness practice, where I just, I grew up in a household where my father was in prison from when I was 5 till I was 16. My mother stayed married to him. My father was a very aggressive, ultra aggressive man. Usually don't get to prison not being an aggressive person. And so I was taught a certain set of skills and a certain way to live and a certain way to a man treats a woman. Like everything that you've learned from your parents, I learned from it in a very, extreme environment, you could say. And so I started realizing that I didn't want to be that way. Because you could, your parents could tell you all they want, do as I say and not as I do. And that's bullshit, right? Yeah, sure. And so I just started realizing that a lot of these things that happened to me when I was younger, I was carrying it on. Right. And a lot of the things that I didn't want to feel or make people feel was actually happening without me thinking about it, because it was just something ingrained in my head. And then I just realized at that point that I didn't want to feel that way or be, not to make this a psychology, but be like my dad, in certain instances and stuff like that. So that's what really kind of propelled all of it for me. Yeah,
sure. And then since then, have you had any particular moments where you're like, whoa, I'm a different person now. I handled that in a different way than I would have?
Oh, totally.
Name one.
So by far, over the last year, I started dating someone, I got engaged and I got married, and dealing with, that's not the right word, but just being in a committed relationship where me being a better man is going to equal a better relationship. I've never even put so much stock into that in my life. So that's definitely been that way. Also, too, as the gym has grown and I've taken on other opportunities, I really realize the more I want to grow, it's really dependent on me being able to listen and hear what people are saying and be compassionate and giving people what they want, not just trying to force people into the hole that I have set for them. And so it just kind of came from all that, growing in a relationship, growing in business, growing as a person, just all of them kind of hit me kind of at once.
Sure.
So been forced to kind of deal with it, and it's been not always the most comfortable, but definitely the most rewarding.
Yeah. And so you mentioned sometime in 2014 was kind of like a tipping point for you in terms of like, okay, I need to reevaluate how I interact with other people and how I interact with the world. Since then, you've become kind of what's your shirt?
Alpha hippie.
An alpha hippie, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. We have this man with a kind of potentially intimidating appearance. Actually, this is another great story. When we were at the games together and we're walking through the crowd, and that guy's like, "Hey man, I like your chest."
That's so crazy. It's so random.
So some guy in the crowd singled Angelo out for his chest, and Angelo's just like, "Thank you, my man."
I don't know what to say. What do you say?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
thanks. I appreciate that.
I was like, all right.
Yeah, it's
Have a good time.
Yeah, carry on, sir. But you've kind of gone down some spiritual rabbit holes, if you will. Is that part of that same process for you? Is that what you started in 2014? Like, all right, I'm gonna like get into weird hippie shit.
Well, I didn't plan on it being anything. It was kind of just at first I started tiptoeing. I started reading stuff about consciousness and spirituality and what's this crazy thing called meditation. I got to sit in a room for 10 minutes and not think, you know what I mean? And doing stuff like that. And, I just think it's part of my personality to want to find the edge on anything that I do. And so, once I started digging deeper into there and started feeling better about things and started seeing the changes that were happening in a lot of my personal relationships and more than anything, like how you think about yourself, right? I mean, for many years, I was successful. Like, you know what I mean? We were successful as a gym. I was successful as a coach in many areas, but, I was constantly seeking others for validation. And that's when I realized that that's a problem.
Sure. Well, and for someone like you, that's interesting as well, because you have this sort of rough around the edges exterior, but you're also simultaneously seeking validation, right? And that's like a difficult thing, especially for people around you to understand what's going on.
Sure. And for me, it was, so just thinking about, like, even thinking about this now, it even comes up from me, just trying to seek out validation from whoever that would give it to me, from whatever it stemmed from. And so I just wanted to think about, why do I want that? And what is the reasons that I go out of my way to seek that? Because that's, to me, then just seemed like a very healthy and serving thing. It was more draining than it was anything. And then so that just led me to going deeper into this, awareness or alpha hippie or whatever you want to call it world, and just trying to really figure out who I was and deciding if what I was given to be when I was younger is who I wanted to be now. And then now I just make better choices, deciding on what kind of man I really want to be. And the truth is, too, it's much more relaxing to live life this way. It's much nicer to play offense more than defense. It's the best way to put it.
Sure. And that's interesting. You also feel like you have some control over who you are, because I don't think most people feel like that.
No.
Yeah. Most people think that, like, well, these are the cards I'm dealt, and like, I'm a flaky, forgetful person and I can't help it. Or like, in my case, I'm an analytical person who I can't turn it off for a second and have fun. So like, whatever.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see how people label themselves, because I labeled myself my entire life.
Sure. And you felt like you were able to change that label.
Sure. That's what kind of came up from Alpha Hippie.
Yeah, there you go.
So Alpha Hippies, like, hippies, I love them. They lead from love. They're very welcoming and warm people.
They listen to jam bands.
Yeah.
Been getting into jam bands?
No. Just some really good house music. And then also, too, about hippies, though, that I wish they had, I saw more of a bigger side of them with, is being more assertive. and not just hoping change will happen, but just being enough alpha to lead change. And so that's what kind of, I said that to somebody was teasing me obviously about, going out and dressing up in costumes and all this crazy stuff that I do. And then I just let them know that one day I was like, man, I'm an alpha hippie. You don't understand. And then I was like, man, this is so cool. I should wear shirts that say alpha hippie so people really know. And then it came to be.
Who would you consider to be the ultimate alpha hippie?
Joe Rogan. It's not even a question. Joe Rogan, Tate Fletcher, top 2.
What about Ron Artest?
What's his name now?
Meta World Peace.
I would say his new name now. Not like there was, I think a few years ago or whatever, maybe 10 years ago, he was like fighting in the bleachers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if that's out. I think the new name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Well, exactly. It's like this guy is a known maniac, like known scary person to be around, and then changed his name to Meta World Peace.
So great.
There was, I don't know if this is actually a real story or not, but there was I recall when he was on the Bulls, there was a story about him being in the locker room and just like repeatedly throwing a basketball like against the wall, like dribbling it against the wall right next to a teammate's head, just like with this weird blank stare on his face, just like slamming it back and forth. And the guy's like, come on, Ron, like, please, no. And Ron's just like going after it forever. I mean, like, a guy like that is kind of terrifying. It's just seemingly immune to outside stimulus.
Sure. I think I don't know if like somebody like him, I don't know if he's coming from a place of love. So that's why I wouldn't give him the alpha hippie. Maybe he's a little out there. But I definitely think men like Joe Rogan and Tate Fletcher, and those are 2 like major dudes that I think are very cool, because I love that they're, you know what? A friend told me this once, Mark England. He said, an alpha hippie is a tree hugger that could actually rip out the tree and smash you with it too.
All right, there you go.
I was like, dude, that's like awesome. That's
Put that on the back of your shirt.
That's it. Ripping off, hugging trees, but smashing it with you too if we need to.
You should actually just make your next shirt have that statement on the back of it.
Be a lot on the back of a shirt.
No, it'd work great.
Okay.
Like, so here's, are you into hardcore music at all?
No.
Okay. Well, I can show you some ideas for shirts that would be perfect. So basically, a common thing for hardcore bands is to have like a picture of them playing live, and then in varsity font above and below that picture, they'll have like a prominent quote from one of their songs. So you could have a picture of yourself in South Africa in nature, and then in varsity font above and below it have the quote about hugging the tree but being able to rip it out.
That's awesome.
That would be excellent, and I'm not kidding that you should actually do that.
All right, I think that's it. I think it's the spring collection of Alpha Hippie, guys.
All right,
you just made it.
All right, good.
I like it.
I'm glad this is happening. All right, so we kind of got sidetracked from talking about your growth as a coach and growth as a business owner.
Sure.
And one of the main influences on you has been Jason Leiden.
Jason Leiden, yeah, absolutely.
Jason, for those who don't know, owns a gym called CrossFit Milford. I met Jason actually at an OPT, now OPEX course out in Scottsdale several years back. Super smart dude, very good dude. Coaches tons of great athletes. CrossFit Milford has been a perennial games team. He's worked with several individual athletes. Craig Kenny, who else?
He works with like Annie Sakamoto. He works with Ron Ortiz, Sean Ramirez. Kalina was an individual, made it to the games. He's had a lot of decorated.
Yeah, sure. So all the social proof and whatnot you need to be like, this guy probably kind of knows something about what he's doing.
For sure.
And Angelo, did you start working with him as a coach? How did you initially meet Jay?
So around 2010, I developed a small obsession with Rob Orlando.
Got it.
Okay. And so I was like, man, this Rob Orlando, this guy's really strong and he's a short, stocky dude, but for some reason he could breathe really well too. What the hell is this guy doing? And then so I just started, that was when he like first really came out of the scene. So they started doing videos and stuff with him, and you would see like behind the scenes of the games, and he was always talking to this like skinny dude. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Okay. And so, found out who Jason was. At this time, I was like, I wanted him to just be my coach as an athlete. And I was like, we'll just start there. And
so is Jason actually coaching Rob?
He was at the time.
Cool.
Yeah, he did through all of.
I don't think I even knew that was a thing.
Yeah, through all of his game stuff. Yeah, and so I messaged Jason on like Facebook. Like this was even. We didn't even need emails or anything like that. So I just messaged him on Facebook, and of course he answered. And so we got together, and that was in 2011. And he just started doing my personal programming. And the thing too at the time is anytime I would get a program, I would email him 1,000 questions because I wanted to know, why do I need to rest 90 seconds in the rower? Or why is it that I have to do this and rest 8 minutes? Like, you know what I mean? And so he was gracious enough.
And not even necessarily in a challenging way. Like, you just want to know, right?
100%. Like, it wasn't to challenge him like I was a combative athlete. It's just I wanted to understand it. And also, too, back then, remote coaching like started getting popular. Like I had a coach in Connecticut. We Skyped once a month and all we did was email. So I wanted to know what I was trying to do every week as just an athlete of trying to chase a stimulus. And so he would explain it all to me. And then, that's how I learned. And I have some crazy trips up to Milford. I did anything to get up there, and we could talk about that too.
We need to.
Yeah. So in 2012, Jason had his athlete camp, and I wanted to go to CrossFit Milford really bad. And at the time, I had enough money to rent a car and fly there and rent a car, but not a hotel. And so, I was like, fuck it, let's do it. And we'll make it happen. And, at that time too, I was still so nervous about the gym. I had like my first coach, and anytime I would leave, it was automatically Cindy. That's all. That's the only word. Don't let anybody die. Do Cindy. It'll be all good. Okay. Yeah. And so we did that. And, I would fly to New York, drive up to Milford. And, one time I slept in the back of a Jetta. Another time I stayed in this sketchiest, he'll even admit it, the Mayflower Hotel in Milford or Motel in Milford is like where, you rent it's like a hotel you rent by the hour. You go there and you get hired, you go there with a hooker or a combination of both. Yeah. And so I didn't know any better, but all I knew was I could afford $40. Sure. So, I put on every piece of sweatshirt I had on my body, and I bundled myself up and I slept on top of the covers, and then I would wake up and go exercise. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I think Jason kind of saw how dedicated I was to doing that. Like I would show up a day early to hang out with him and ask him questions, and he was gracious enough to give me his time. And so we developed this relationship. And then also too, for me as a business owner, when I went to CrossFit Milford in 2012, he had like 400 members, and like he was already like an established gym. And I was like, I'm going to make CrossFit Milford back home. And this is what I'm going to do. Sure. Tell me everything you know, everything you do, because I'm going to go do it. And I was just there. And so, Jason was so nice and helped me with everything. I mean, I think at the time too, the first visit, I still took cash. Yeah. Like I was like, you had to track members down and be like, hey, with man, the clipboard. I was like, what's this? How do you take money? He's like, Mindbody. I'm like, Mindbody? What is this? He's like, just check it out. And like all this stuff. And I really had no clue, but Jay kind of just maybe saw something in me. And then over the years, as I've been able to progress with working with some athletes and stuff like that, he's become an unbelievable resource for me to be able to program and coach. And then now over the last maybe year and a half, 2 years, we've been doing actually seminars together. So
I just got back from South Africa.
South Africa. It's our second year in South Africa. We were in Cape Town and Durban for 12 days and did 2.5 day seminars, and we get to hang out all day, and it's amazing just to be able to do this, and especially with him, somebody that I admire very much.
Sure. And I think that a lot of people want a mentor, right? They're like, how do I get a mentor? Right. And then it doesn't work out for them, that they end up, reaching out to someone and, maybe the person answers some questions, but like kind of gets annoyed by them, or they don't really get what they're looking for out of that type of relationship. How did you, was this a plan where you're like, I'm going to make Jason my mentor? Like, or is it just kind of like you just kept showing up and asking questions?
I think at first it was just I was showing up and then asking questions. But then after a while, I started to realize how much I would come back with and how excited I was, and how every time I went to Milford, there was something new. Or when I would go in Jason's office, I would take a picture of his bookshelf every single time. And if there was a book on there that I didn't buy or haven't read already, I would buy it. And I would just be like, if he's reading it, I should be reading it. And it became one of those things where I just followed everything that he kind of did. He did everything with OBT. I'm like, I guess I got to go do that stuff. And so it just kind of went from there. So I don't think at first it became just me copying him, and then that wound up being my mentorship. It wasn't something really formal where I asked him to do it. I was just like, tell me what you do, and I went and just blindly did it.
Yeah, sure.
And then figured out if I liked it after.
And you seem to have this, again, remarkable capacity to just take a ton of action to make yourself learn more, right? Like you're just going to show up to some kipping pull-up clinic. You're going to drive to some sketchy part of Milford and stay at an hourly hotel just to potentially learn something from a guy who you think is a good coach. You're going to actually just take a picture of his bookshelf and then legitimately read the book. It's not just be like, oh yeah, cool, I'll read that maybe. It's like, no, I'm actually going to do it. Why?
I just feel like you owe it to yourself to find your potential. And if you don't want to find your potential in a certain area, I could dig that, because there was a lot of things that I was completely turned off to. But I think in your life, you have to find one thing and fucking play it till you bleed. Really, you do. And I think you learn so much about yourself forcing yourself to do that repetitively. I think it just becomes that, and there's not much like going to do something and going to learn it and then realizing that moment that you actually learned it. It's a very proud moment, and I like to repeat those moments.
Sure.
So that would be the best way I could explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that people think they want to do, but they don't understand what that actually means. They don't understand what it means to be like, okay, I don't actually have enough money to do this, so I'm going to make it happen anyway. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to show up at the seminar that like I'm probably not actually supposed to be at and just be here and figure it out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think consistency. I think everything's endurance. And nobody likes endurance, right? It's just, very few people do, but I just, it's a test of endurance. Like, okay, so you do this every day, and then eventually becomes something. And that's so unsexy to hear. It's so unsexy to live it, but it's just a reality.
Sure. So before we actually started recording, I had sent you some questions, and one of them was just about, your relationship with Jay. Mm-hmm. And I asked you, how did you basically keep following up with him without creeping him out? And is he creeped out by you, just like being a weird guy who does everything he does? And you started to tell a story, and we're like, okay, well, maybe we should save it for the actual recording.
I can't wait.
Let's hear it.
All right. So I think Jay, because as soon as you sent me these questions, I called him up and we were laughing about this question. So one, I think Jay was really excited to have such an aggressive pupil. And I know this as a coach too, is if you have somebody that really wants to learn, genuinely is interested in learning for the right reasons and to grow and to do all that, it is the benefit of coaching. And also too, having somebody as eager, you learn a lot more because you're getting asked these questions. And so the thing about our relationship now that kind of creeps Jason out is it started last year in Africa. So we were in South Africa last year and we went to a safari, and it was me, Jason, and his wife, Jocelyn. And we had these rooms that were huts. I had a hut and Jason and his wife had a hut. And it was nighttime, and they had these unbelievable showers, and they were outside though. So you would walk outside in your yard and you would shower. Okay. And it was so awesome. And then, so I was outside in my hut showering, and then Jason was in his room, and I guess Jocelyn was out showering. And I thought it would be the funniest thing to just sprint through Jason's room completely naked. Okay. And
it's like a personal streaking.
Oh my God. It's so funny. And so Jason is a very reserved man. Like I would never put him on. I would never bet he would do something like that. So I did it. And then, so now, ever since then, we've connected at different places, different hotels. I always make an excuse for Jason to see me naked. And it's without fail. It's like, I have to do it. If I don't do it, it doesn't qualify as a visit. So the few times we see each other per year, it involves me being naked in front of him. And I think that now it's become funny, but at first it had to creep him out all the time that like my first thing was we would stay in a hotel room together and I would sleep with no bottoms.
Sure.
So I would be like, I would have a good t-shirt on and I would get up to go pee.
The girlfriend outfit?
Yeah, like a little thigh count, and you would just see like my butt and everything hanging out. And that's how this kind of all started. So by far the nudeness that I give Jason now probably creeps him out the most.
So Jason is not comfortable with male nudity. I think
I'm very open about it.
Sure.
So like I'm the old guy in the locker room.
Yeah, well, you know what, that surprises me because I know he played professional basketball.
He does.
Right? I mean, like if you're in a group of males traveling around like that, like there's bound to be aggressive nudity meant to make you uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if it's something that happened, but me and him, it's a running joke.
Yeah, well, you know what? I played soccer growing up, traveling soccer, and there's always like the kid who is like, all right, like Matt Harnack, like, oh, you're gonna just like take a shit everywhere we go, like outside, like why? But I mean, it's just a behavior that occurs. But I'm thinking back on just like being on tour with bands, right? I mean, there's all kinds of nudity occurring like in the van, like people are just like, oh, I'm just gonna get naked now, and inevitably there's one or two people who are like, come on, man, like what are you doing? Like, no, right? Yeah. But I mean, it's funny.
It's just hysterical.
Yeah, exactly. But it requires that reaction from the person to be not into it. In order to,
for sure, if he was neutral, I'd stop.
Yeah,
don't listen to that part.
Yeah, but if he's like shielding his eyes, it's like, oh, geez, come on. Yeah.
Okay, it's the greatest.
All right, cool. So Jason is not creeped out by your intensity or your follow up or your desire to just kind of like learn as much as you could from him, but he is creeped out by your desire to reveal your nude body to him.
Totally. Jason. I think I'm a little more outward with my intensity, but Jason and I are very similar in our intensity to do anything.
Sure.
So I think he just responds to it because he understands.
Yeah. So you got yourself to a point with O'Hare CrossFit where you can do a lot of business coaching. Mm-hmm. And for a while you were coaching with Barbell Shrugged, right? I mean, Barbell Logic. Yep. And you were managing the coaching for hundreds of gyms? Yeah. Is that correct? That, yes, yeah, for sure. So that's a lot of stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of different businesses that you've seen. And, obviously you're going to be spotting trends and things like that based upon that. So, I mean, I have some specific questions about how you go through that coaching process with people. But from your perspective, I mean, what are the big picture things that you see these kinds of gyms struggling with? And what are the missing pieces that they need to take themselves out of that kind of a stuck level?
Wow, such a good question. I think by far one of the most challenging things for a lot of CrossFit gym owners, and I hope anybody that's listening to this to a gym owner really takes this and understands this, is some people have been lifelong entrepreneurs. I owned businesses since I was 17. There's just certain things when you're an entrepreneur, you seem to be a little bit more resourceful. You almost enjoy the uncertainty. And for some gym owners that have come from a corporate background or different things like that, it can be very difficult to like uncertainty or to be a little bit gritty and things like that. So I think those things could be really challenging for gym owners, and that also will kind of play into their vision and their goals. I think a lot of people say they want a lot of big things, and then if you ask them how they want to spend their day, it's not what those big things would entail.
So you mean just sort of like a misalignment between, say, I want a gym with 400 members and I want to coach CrossFit Games athletes and this, that, whatever. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, what do you want to do on a daily basis? And then what do they say?
They're like, I want to get up. I want to just hang out with my family all day, maybe work for about an hour or two. And then I'm like, great. For you to build that business that you want to, you're most likely not going to have that lifestyle. So let's talk about that, like kind of matching up their perfect day and their goals and really helping them like you said, like get aligned with really what they want and who they are. And I was caught up in this when I was younger. I just wanted, and you wrote this in here too, like I wanted O'Hare CrossFit to be the only brand of CrossFit in the western suburbs. And I wanted to crush every single person on earth that would dare open up a gym within 5 miles of me. It's just honest. And and then now to think about having another gym or another 2 gyms, I'd rather slit my wrist.
Yeah, you mean like owning more locations?
Yeah, like at one time I was like, I need 5 locations. I want 300 members in each location, and then to think about like what that would mean for my day now, it would be poisonous to me. I just wouldn't want to live that day. And some people may, but that's just a point of being misaligned. Because why did I want that? Because I wanted validation from other people that I was the man, instead of being like, man, I really don't care. I would rather kick it all day, go do jujitsu, go hang out, go have lunch with my wife every day, go do yoga. Like I dig freedom. So I try to make a business that gives me freedom. And for many gym owners, I don't know if they're sure what their drug of choice is, the drug of life is, I should say. And that just comes from not having that background of being an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying that you can't transform into one. Obviously, nobody's born one, but having education of what it just is to be a business owner, I think is one of the biggest tools that's missing. I didn't have great business owner skills when I started my gym.
Me neither.
And so the sooner gym owners could stop worrying about butt, back, and knees out and start worrying about those other things, I think they're going to be just better, because they're going to be able to eat. You know what I mean? That's like the thing is, I never met a person that opened up a CrossFit gym that had bad intentions or just wanted to be a multimillionaire. They just want to help people, but at the same time, they need to make sure they're in the position to help themselves.
Sure. So you see kind of a misalignment in terms of expectations as far as business growth, as well as what that would actually take from an individual owner. I mean, so let me ask you this about that. Do they just think that like, okay, once I get to that, whatever, 300, 400 member gym, that then I can just sit there for an hour a day and it'll just kind of run itself? Is that their goal?
Yeah, I think like you said, there's just some drastic off expectations between everybody, and not really realizing what this journey would look like. Also too, it's if you've never developed a team and hired people and fired people, that's a whole different world. And I know some people have been managers and things like that. That's great. But when you're really the owner and you're deciding if this person's going to be in your business, the amount of emotion, personal buy-in you want, and personal whatever teaching you give to them is much at a different level than if you're just a manager at Sears and you get hired a couple new clerks for the holidays.
Sure.
And so I think just for most gym owners, just getting educated on all those things and not being mad at this is what the game is, but just accepting that this is really the game. It's not, I'm going to turn on some lights, put on some Rick Ross, 3, 2, 1, go, and we're going to make money. I mean, those days are long gone.
Yeah, sure. And on a more tactical level then, I mean, you see this misalignment in terms of what people are looking for versus what they're actually doing versus what they think is going to happen in their business. How do you help someone prioritize what to work on? Because I think this is one of the most challenging things in any coaching situation, whether it's working with a business owner, whether it's working with an athlete who's trying to compete in CrossFit, whether it's working with someone who's a general fitness and weight loss client, is that people are overwhelmed with information. There's so much stuff that they can look up and they see on Instagram, and they read this article and their dad said this and their friend who owns a business said that. How do you help them focus? I mean, how do you just say, okay, cool, you need to focus on sales. You need to focus on marketing. Like you need to focus on figuring out what your vision actually is, because you think you're going to have this gym with this many members and what you're saying you want to do isn't the case. Like where do you push people and how do you decide what to work on?
Sure. So the first thing I do is, some people will say like, yeah, what do you want in 10 years? I think 10 years is a very drastic goal to start writing out for most people. So I just tell people, give me 3 to 5 years. And then I have them write their perfect day. And then we really see if they equal each other. And then if they do, we start moving forward. My next thing is really understanding what business we're in. And I'm in a firm belief that we're in the relationship and service business. And CrossFit is the medium that we use to develop relationships. We're not in the CrossFit business. And so I think once gym owners wrap their head around that, they start seeing things a lot different, because now you know what really matters in your business is developing genuine relationships with people, and everything else happens after that. Most people won't listen to your pull-up progression until you've developed trust. So don't just worry about the pull-up progression. And this takes us back to what we said earlier. 4 or 5 years ago, people walked in these doors to get good at CrossFit. They wanted to grip. They wanted to buy jump ropes. They wanted to learn double unders. If you did singles, you were an outcast. It's the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. And nowadays it's like people are here to get fit and feel good. And it's a different market for what we're doing. And so I'm a big preacher of understanding the relationship business that we're doing. And I like to focus on the client experience side. I think many of us coming from the place where we understand fitness, we understand exercise, but this client experience and even articulating it so our team could teach it to other people and what we really want from them is really important. And so I talk with them about like, what do you want your clients to feel every class? Okay, perfect. How does that happen on a day-to-day basis? Because those are the things to me that affect the whole business. So I don't care what kind of snazzy Facebook marketing you're running. I don't really care if you do group intros or free intros or one-on-one intros or no sweat intros. If your steak doesn't sizzle, who gives a shit? Right? And knowing how to do it on a day-to-day basis is so important. So goals, making sure they're perfect day, writing out and understanding the experience that they're trying to provide for the people. And experience is a feeling. So what kind of feeling are you trying to make people have? And then after that, I'll start looking at what is your sales process like? What does your marketing look like? And making sure that those are in tune. And then it's usually, if those are all in sync, then team development. I think having consistent meetings and holding people accountable is a very difficult thing for a lot of gym owners. I know for me, for many years it was just like, all right, I thought, Becca was my first full-time hire. I thought she instantly knew everything she had to do because she's getting paid.
Yeah. And she saw me do it, so.
Yeah, that's it. You got it right back? Okay, cool. And not like thinking about how she learns or writing SOPs and doing all that. So I think in that order.
Sure. So top priorities for you are aligning the vision for the business with what the owner actually sees themselves doing on a daily basis. And then not necessarily the coaching know-how, but the actual client experience. Mm-hmm. What do you think about in more tangible terms as far as client experience? Because I think that's something that makes sense and sounds good. You're like, yeah, for sure. Cool. Like client experience. Yes. Sure. Let's do good at that. Yeah. But what does that actually mean? Like, what are you doing either here at O'Hare or with coaches who you work with? Like, what are you telling them to do?
100%. I'll show you right now. So I took this from Marcus Guerzi. He was nice enough to do a presentation for us at our coaches weekend. So we wrote out what we categorize as the 5-star experience. Okay. So all my coaches get this. I just printed out some bigger posters they're going to hang in the office. So one, the velvet rope effect, sort of like your gym is a very cool club, and every single time a member comes in there, you should act like they're VIPs. And you should treat them like they're VIPs. If you walk past a member and not like say hello or act like you acknowledge your existence, why should they pay you $200 a month? And so that's one of it.
Would you let a man sell pizza to your clients outside of your gym in order to facilitate them feeling like they're entering a cool club?
Well, if it was, yeah, I guess if it's a healthy pizza, we got paleo pizza makers. So yeah, like that. Number 2 is the best hour of our day. Making sure everything's engaging, inspiring, and fun. Be a good host. I think this is super important where, this was something kind of natural that I kind of took on just from being around my mother is, Italian-American mothers are very good hosts. They grab your jackets, they get you stuff to drink, and you feel really comfortable every time you see them and you come to their events or you hang out with them or they come into the gym. And I think being a good host is essential for people to have a really good experience. This next one is kind of funny, but it really matters, is smile. I know for me, when I was younger, I would have a bad workout and then I would ruin the whole night's classes. I would shit the bed and be a dick the whole evening classes because I blew out on a workout. 100% truth. I would make it like you would feel that like the energy deflate simply because like I ripped my hand doing a set of pull-ups. Like just like childish shit. But it's all for whatever reason it's true. And then be an ambassador, like never complain, participate in events, encourage each other and represent. So we came up with this, and I like to help people understand this. They could take that one, they can make a version of their own, whatever they want it to be. But I think that needs to be articulated. This is what we stand for. If you want to work here, as much as you know about pull-ups, you know this. You know how to do this on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so client experience isn't necessarily the coaching cues. It's not necessarily the equipment. It's not necessarily the music being played or the cleanliness of the facility. And not that those things don't matter.
Sure.
It's how do you actually create that relationship with the individuals who are actually coming in.
100%. So we're all here. We all make decisions, either consciously or not conscious or unconsciously, to get an emotion. Right? People are coming here for an emotional response, right? And that could be them doing better in the workout, or for some people, that's just being seen and cheered on because they're not getting that in their life, or that day they got their teeth kicked in at work. And so we're here to provide it.
What do you do? So I think something that's interesting about this for you, I mean, hearing you talk about your pizza business and all that, that seems like something that's intuitive to you. That you know, you may be moody or emotional sometimes, but you know, like, hey, if I have to turn it on and influence this person, like I kind of know what to do. How do you teach someone who maybe a gym owner who doesn't have that skill, who, you know, maybe overly analytical or overly systematic and not tuned into people's emotions and just doesn't necessarily understand that that's the stuff that actually matters to people? How do you explain that to them?
It's so great because I actually have a recent coach that we've hired who comes from a more introvert kind of background. It's not his jam to be up there and know what his body language even is, or his smile and things like that. My suggestion and what I would do for him or any gym owner is pick the one area that you know that can make a difference, and just focus on one little area. So if you could smile, if doing that, if you could just stand with your arms not crossed for an hour when you're coaching, that's an improvement for most people's body language. And so just try to think about one little area and tackle that and not be so overwhelmed. Because I think most people don't try that experience and emotional side because it's very overwhelming, or it could be they have these things in their brain that it's an all-in kind of thing. All of a sudden you need to be a stand-up comedian to coach exercise. And you really don't. It's just be engaging. Like make people know that they're there. And that's a simple hello and a high five. It doesn't need to be, you're not jumping up like Apollo and Rocky running in the beach in part 3. It's just little things to do that. And so I work with him on it. For him right now, it's presence and body language. It's just, how are you standing? Are you smiling? Do you ever change the tone in your voice when you're trying to make a point across? That's it. Like he doesn't, and so picking one of those little areas and just working on it and just realizing that this is kind of the business that you're in. And I would also argue too, like when we compare this with other gyms, is I want to be the Ritz-Carlton of CrossFits. Okay, so when you go to Ritz-Carlton, there's a certain expectation when you go there. And you set a standard there and people have to do that. I want to be Ritz-Carlton. Some people open hotels and they want to be Holiday Inns, and they just need to decide if they're going to leave the light on for people, or you're going to get greeted like you're the king and queen of the world. And so for me, I really want that. I want people that want to be on my team to do that. And I think most gym owners, deep down got in this business to share their knowledge and really help people. And I think if they could just tweak one little area, they'd find it.
Sure. So you kind of focus on small, winnable behavior change.
Totally.
Same thing as with nutrition coaching.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, you get the same stuff where it's like, okay, well, if I'm not doing an intermittent fasting, ketogenic, paleo diet, then why even bother?
Right.
And it's not helpful.
It's just like stop drinking Coke.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. It's easier than that.
Yeah.
And that's probably not a good idea anyway to do that. So please don't do an intermittent fasting, ketogenic, paleo diet. No. I don't even think that makes sense.
No, I think it could happen, but it's just aggressive. Just one little thing that you could take on and start becoming aware about yourself. And I think for a lot of people too, is just record yourself coaching. I did the cross arm thing. That's what I did. Yeah. So like I did the cross arm thing. I've done it, and it's almost a focusing posture.
It's because strange men yell at you about your chest.
Yeah,
so you're trying to protect yourself.
I'm just trying to cover them up. But yeah, so that's just something I've noticed about me. And so when I'm standing on the floor, I just try to be better at it.
Yeah. What about, I mean, you mentioned some specific staff development stuff. How do you handle that process internally? I mean, because I think that that's something else that's challenging for gym owners is they have coaches and it's like, okay, there's a few people who are here helping out, but like, I don't really know what they're doing. Like They could be doing what I want them to. They could be doing whatever they want. Okay, maybe I have someone full time and either I don't want to deal with the process of having meetings or I don't have the bandwidth to do it, or I assume that meetings are a waste of time and nothing gets done. So what does that internal structure look like for you guys to keep people doing what you expect of them?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's mandatory for every gym owner or any business owner, depending on your bandwidth, obviously, you should have a meeting every week with your employees, even if 10 or 15-minute meeting about them personally. I think you need to know where they're at in their lives. And I took this from athletes. So many times I would ask athletes, hey man, what's going on in your life? You stressed out? Because I knew that if, Jim broke up with his girlfriend and he stayed up half the night, drinking, that he's probably going to have bad training all week. But we don't look at our employees like that. We look at them like, yeah, you're paid, so you should be perfect all the time. But if you could just have those little check-ins and conversations, you could understand them and also make adjustments for them if necessary, or, just be truthful with them too. And I think that having a little 10 or 15-minute meeting with everybody that works for you is no sacrifice.
Sure. And so that's essentially building the network of relationships the same way you would with clients, the same way you would with bouncers and valets, is like, hey, I'm checking in with you because if we have this trust in this relationship, then it's much easier for both of us to move forward.
Absolutely. So definitely doing that. I think writing out very clear expectations for everybody keeps things very aligned and sets really good boundaries. I didn't do that for many years. So I had people that worked here and I would let some things slide and then I would act like they said something rude to my mother. I'd be so upset. Right? Yeah. And it was only because I didn't know how to communicate well with what I really wanted out of them and what I expected from them on a day-to-day basis. So I know that writing out that stuff is not always the most fun, because Lord knows I don't really enjoy it either, but it just needs to be done, because if they're not doing what they're supposed to do and you don't have it written down, it's your fault.
Yeah, so you're basically taking all that responsibility on yourself to figure that out,
right? And
say, okay, if you're not doing what I want you to, this is my fault.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's worth finding time to put into people. It just is. When people show up and they, I think it's probably the closest thing to what parents probably feel like is if when your kids do something that you would have wanted them to do without you saying it, it's like the proudest moment ever. And it makes all of the 50,000 times they did the wrong thing, just erase. I feel that way too. So I'm a very big people-centric person, if you couldn't get that by the most of this podcast. So I think spending time with your people, learning what makes them tick, learning what for instance, for Christmas bonuses this year, I gave 3 options. I said, what do you guys want? Do you want money? Do you want a unique gift? Or do you want time off with pay? And everybody took different things.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. But you see that what most people would do is they would just write a check.
Yeah.
But I'd rather give them what they're hoping for. So somebody's got time off. Another person, we're redoing my office so they could have a better spot here. One person I made Willy Wonka golden tickets, and they're for days off. So he's just got to present us with his golden ticket when he wants a day off, and he gets a day off with pay. And so I think just doing that, and that's understanding people and how they work, because we're all just different, unique creatures.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And again, for you, it seems like that's an intuitive process, but you've sort of grown enough to codify it more and make it more clear in terms of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, I think it's something that innately that I do or have done, but the execution of it has been very much more refined over the years.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Angelo, you got a meeting with another person coming up.
It's okay.
So let's wrap it up, man.
This was amazing.
What do you want the people to know about you? Where do you want them to go if they want to learn more about your life and your clothing?
So on Instagram, the Alpha Hippie. If anybody's digging our brand or what we're about, please DM us and we'd be happy to send you a shirt. All we ask is that you take a picture on Instagram with wearing it, and you'll get one. That's all we really want. If you have any questions about business coaching or gym ownership, currently right now I'm not actively looking for clients or business coaching, but if you're a CrossFit gym owner, we have much more in common than we do different. So email me at Angelo at O'Hare CrossFit and let me know your questions. Please give me at least a week to answer for your email. It's just something I'm not going to jump on, but I'm definitely going to get around to helping you. And those are my two main goals.
Hey, this is Todd again, and as most of you know, I consume, read, listen to, watch an absurd amount of content on a regular basis, and a few times per month I send out my thoughts on some of the most interesting or insightful stuff that I've taken a look at. You can be on the list to receive this fascinating, captivating, and delightful information at toddneef.com. That's I before E. Head over there, go ahead and type your email address in, and then as I send these things out, again, a few times a month, you'll get it and you'll be inundated with a carefully curated list of the best stuff that I am experiencing.